What I'm talking about is general, oriented in human psychology metrics for human well-being. That's what I'm talking about. Those should be relatively agreeable. We
Human
should be able to
well-being is a
collectively
subjective
come
term.
together and cooperate on the.
Do you just right? Yep, cooked them, cooked them.
Ooh, ooh.
Yep.
Human well-being is a subjective term. I dropped him. I'm not dealing with that bullshit.
Hello?
Yep. Good afternoon or evening.
Good evening. How are you today?
Good. How's it going?
Fine. Are you MAGA?
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because I think I voted for him because I agree with his policy. Mainly for me, it was about immigration and draining the swamp.
Oh, sorry, I'm making my ramen. Well, I would say that if it was about policies, you're excluding a lot of important elements to the way you should be voting. I think character and the way that they can affect a country through other means really matters. But if you just want to talk about policy, then yeah, we can do that. And I would say policy alone is somewhat disqualifying. I don't think he had a really coherent immigration plan. I don't think he really understood the issues with immigration very well. He himself, when it came to immigration, influenced the striking down of a significant border bill by Langford that would have helped a lot with the key elements that affect some of the significant problems with immigration and the drug issues at the border. He struck it down for political reasons because he didn't want to solve an issue prior to him, getting to the election, which to me shows that he's a bad faith actor pretty heavily in that area. And then draining the swamp is laughably dumb, fuck, stupid shit in every conceivable way, given the fact that he's already put in a bunch of his billionaire friends and he's given them almost complete access with so few checks and balances to a lot of things, such as giving Elon Musk access to a lot of private banking information for literally everybody in the entire US. Unhinged. I'm sorry, no. Hello?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to respond or.
Do you disagree with my assessment of his
Well,
immigration
before I engage with you,
or
I
the
had a
draining the
question
swamp
to
thing
the
that you cared
host.
about? Huh?
Before I engage with you, I had a question for the host.
Oh, okay.
So, how would you constitute failing? How would you define that?
Why me? I just
It's your
host.
prompt.
These ones talk.
Okay, so you don't hold that view, or
Oh, no, I do. But I don't
so
speak.
you don't want to argue it.
I'm just here.
Well, that's fine. So I can go to the other person's positions. So
Yeah, you can talk to critically.
Mr. Critically, from my understanding, it looks like Trump has maybe has like a consulting agreement or a task force agreement. Maybe it's a contractor agreement. Probably looks like a task force type thing. And from my understanding, the executive branch can grant clearance to whoever they want. Well, I mean, within reason, to look at whatever personal information to get a task done. Do you agree with that?
Okay. What was your initial claim about what he was going to do?
Drain the swamp.
So why are you pivoting to legal technicalities? All the swamp stuff happening before was legal. It was proper. It was according to the law. Yet he was complaining about, hey, it's very swampish, and we got to get rid of all these people who, coordinate and use these bureaucratic levers to not help out the American people and are just in bed with each other and all that shit. All of that. He didn't actually mention anything that was illegal. He just said it was corrupt. And all that, from my mind, was above board, albeit I disagree with a lot of our laws in the country. So I don't know why you're turning to the legality of engaging these actions when we're talking about avoiding corruption and coordination that's not intended to please the American people.
Well, I guess it goes on to, you might think I'm pivoting. It could be based off of your definition of what corruption is. Would you say that corruption is legal but wrong, or is it wrong and illegal?
Corruption can be legal, illegal, and it's wrong, period.
I can give you an example of what I think was dumb, but was it corrupt? I mean, you could make that assessment, but like, I don't necessarily. I mean, you could probably convince me of it, but I don't think I view corruption the way you do in the same way, in the sense that I think if you're doing things legally within your executive purview, then it might not be the nicest thing to do, might be a little bit risky, but I think corruption is kind of like a subjective metric.
It is subjective, and he kind of ran upon that subjectivity um, in order to kind of corral these, populist, disaffected people groups, um, which is kind of a pathetic, not very specific way of trying to address issues. When I'm just talking about corrupt, I'm talking about using, and when I'm talking about legal corruption, I'm talking about using technicalities within the law in order to break the spirit of the law. So, for example, there are specific limitations had on donations made to judges. And, you're not allowed to pay judges. You can't give them bribes. You can't do all this types of shit, right? The issue is when you take those limitations, like Clarence Thomas, for example, and you stretch them out by labeling things as gifts, meetings, fancy meetings with lobbyists, big vacations, and things like that. When you label those as just gifts, you're breaking the spirit of the law, even though you're technically falling under the technicality of the law. This is something that Trump does extensively. It's something that business people do extensively, which is why they're scary to put in government, because they're kind of designed to avoid it and create as many loopholes. As Kitty is saying, as many loopholes as possible. So that's my issue.
Okay, then it just seems like we have a subjective difference on what we would consider corruption. So that's your opinion. That's yours.
I don't care how you want to call corruption or the label you want to put. I want the semantic content of what you think Trump was campaigning against and how you think that what he's doing now is not a reflection of the very thing he was campaigning against.
Okay,
So when he said drain the swamp, what was his issue?
From my understanding, it looks like there may be some type of stronghold, some type of bureaucratic stronghold that's going on, and if he's going to be a part of breaking that up, then I support that. So, for example, what's going on right now with the current... Okay.
No, go ahead.
What's going on right now with the current Doge situation, that's what it appears to be what's going on. Elon Musk has like some type of weird task force that he's gotten access to banking or budget information through USAID, and him exposing that is shedding light on that is a good thing. Letting the American people
USAID, but
was not him pushing against USAID. Isn't that what led to somebody resigning just recently?
Well, Trump was pushing against USAID, which caused the program to be, aside from certain essential things, essentially stopped, which is going to cause a lot of health problems around the world. But that was different from his access to a bunch of banking information and social security stuff and things.
I would say it's related,
but it might be part of the Doge project, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so what's wrong with this quote unquote bureaucratic stronghold?
At this moment, I'm convinced that there's probably, once again, some type of stronghold where a lot of the money is going to either wasteful things or things that the people who voted for him wouldn't agree with. And there may be some, this is just a claim, I don't know it to be true or not, but there may be a corruptive element where people are getting money off the top of a lot of these programs.
So what makes the money wasted?
It would be
because this is why I think Trump is engaging in the exact same thing.
It would be based on my opinion, based on the mandate, in the sense that I voted for a certain thing to get done, and if what I deem as wasteful aligns with my political perspective, then that's what I deem as wasteful.
Okay, well then that's going to be a little bit problematic because it doesn't actually assess whether or not a candidate is good for a nation, and there's no broader metrics you're using. So generally, like waste is any type of money or resource oriented towards a directive, either not efficiently or towards sub elements of the directive that don't work towards the broader directive. So it is true that there's a decent amount of waste in the government. That's some of the biggest waste, to be honest, is through the military spending. The waste comes through overpaying contractors by setting up these no bidding instances where contractors get to essentially just write
a check request to the government and they get paid all that fucking money. So that's an example of a big waste. Trump doesn't seem to be attentive to dealing with that at all that I've seen. It's in fact, he seemed to have gone he's gone after some of the more efficient programs like USAID, which is kind of crazy to me. And so that's the problem that I have, is doesn't seem like Trump has this clear desire to just get rid of waste broadly. It seems like he's doing it in ways that are disruptive or that are politically popular. And he's not really showing us at first. He's not really showing us how what he's doing is actually reducing wasteful spending and increasing cost efficiency.
Okay, so I understand that oftentimes as people, we make decisions that are intuitive or gut or maybe off ideological lines or identitarian lines or like what's the word? Like by race or by gender. But like if you were going to gauge the Trump's like approval rating, I would assume most people that voted for him would be approving of what he's doing. So once again, you can say that you're not convinced that you're not convinced that he's attacking waste because you value, let's just say, war.
I don't care what his supporters
think. Finish. Like, can I finish or what?
No, well, you're making a point.
You made like 3 or 4. I'm just making 2.
Okay, if you have another point to make, but I was just gonna say that the point you're making right now is irrelevant.
It's entirely relevant because based on my second point that ties it together, the way that you may view what waste is might be different. You might view military as a waste, where I view T therapy and contraceptives for certain Middle Eastern countries as a waste. So that's where the subjective threshold comes into play.
Are you a fucking postmodernist?
No.
What is this subjective talk? Do you understand what USAID? Hold on. Do you understand what USAID does?
From my understanding, it's a investment department that basically invests in certain things around the world, including culture.
Okay, why?
It could be for enrichment. It could be for allies.
It's a State Department negotiating tool. That's what USAID is. Now, good things come out of that, like supporting HIV ending or supporting the ending of HIV, or contraceptives or food aid or a bunch of other shit. There are some good things that come out of that. But the primary function of it isn't some broader philanthropic benevolence. It's because the State Department uses that as a tool for its diplomats when they go over to other countries to negotiate treaties and negotiate business interests. That's how the fucking USAID operates.
I'm not arguing that's not the case.
Okay, so one, it doesn't make any sense when you say something like USAID is a waste. Okay, do you think that?
I never said that.
To be fair, maybe you're some Russian, China bot or something, but assuming you care about U.S. dominance in the world, which is what Trump purportedly cares about, cutting USAID is taking away that bargaining chip from the State Department. It's so confusing, and it's like, and I'm not pro-U.S. hegemony. Let me be clear, but it doesn't make sense according to Trump's very own efforts and what he's trying to stand for.
So once again, I can explain how it does. So just to move backwards, if the USAID goes away, that doesn't mean that the method as to which he uses to be diplomatic would cease to exist. There could just be other methods that he can do. And secondly, the way that presidents are hired is based on the collective will of the population. And given that we won the House, the Senate, etc.
Not the fascist speak.
Yeah, so it's funny how when democracy doesn't work, I'm a fascist. Like when democracy doesn't work in your favor, I'm a fascist.
No, I was making a joke about the collective will comment. That's explicitly a fascist phrase.
Yeah, I don't care what it sounds like. So, anyways, basically, if I vote for somebody to come in, I want them to do the job that I asked them for. So if Trump is not getting pushback for what he's doing, especially, I would bet right now, if you went in the polls right now, he's going to be doing just a-okay amongst people who voted for him. We want deportation. We want to drain the swamp. And if it appears that he's doing said thing, we're okay with it. So I don't see how that's...
By his own words.
Go ahead.
Trump, by his own words, says he cannot do his wrong by his own people. He literally said this at the start of his campaign in 2016.
Mhm.
He could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. That's the issue that I have, is that Trump supporters are brain broken.
I can show you
They
one way that he's
support
wrong.
Trump, and then they post hoc adjust their policy beliefs, their general principles, in order to fit under that broader support for Trump. Whether they're pro-economy, pro-capitalist, or pro-protectionist, whether they're isolationist or interventionist, they wobble between all of these different contradictory positions depending on what Trump wants, because Trump is an egomaniac that likes flaring up policy positions that sound like they're populist.
Yeah, so I understand there's a cultural claim that you're making a broader argument against, and that's a totally separate thing from whether or not the USAID is giving tea therapy and Sesame Street to some Lebanese country. To me, this literally sounds like waste, and it might not to you because you would say, "Hey, look, we're trying to secure allies here." But I would argue, "Hey, like, what type of allies do we want? Do we want allies on like a different ideological line than mine's? Obviously not. So if he's going to use that money that went to like tea therapy and in some country to instead go to the wall or to building another alliance that I ideologically agree with, then I'm cool with that. Does that make sense?
Wait, okay. Just to be clear, when he talked about things like FEMA and USAID, he
Mhm.
said that these things should be reformed or go away entirely.
Mhm.
Going away entirely means you're getting rid of that mechanism,
Mhm.
that poker chip for the State Department. If you believe in American sovereignty and global domination for America, that doesn't make any sense. It's a
I can
contradiction.
argue how it does. If one
Okay,
party
you
isn't
don't have
convinced
to.
that, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying, you don't have to prime every time. You can just say what you want to say.
All right. So the just because you get rid of a entire, let's just say the USAID does go away and the Department of Education and FEMA, that doesn't mean that we're not as good at doing our job. And I can argue because if we're becoming leaner as a country and we're becoming less wasteful, then we can put our dollars to other things. It's that simple.
Well, no, this just doesn't measure the harm outcomes that manifest when these programs are removed or are reduced. And it's presumptuous to assume that, or presume that if you cut funding, that these things will like miraculously heal themselves. Like
Yeah, but I
that's
reject the
just
harm
not the.
principle.
Well, pardon?
I reject the harm principle in the sense that, sure, it may create
Well,
harm in the long run, but if my ultimate goal is different than whatever I'm going to disregard harm for,
Well, so
that's
that's
irrelevant
the
to me.
question, right? That's currently the question is whether or not we're measuring that harm, and you keep like reducing the conversation down to, well, this is within my interest, so the vote is good. The question would be, what is it that manifests negatively amongst American citizens that we have seen historically or can apply today that would be bad or that would have failed America? So, like, rather
But
than reducing this down
mm,
to, oh, well, Trump supporters voted for this. This is what the desired outcome may be. Like, is this desired outcome actually good? Would be the question.
but I think what's going on is you're making a value statement or a value argument, and it kind of just devolves from there.
Well,
Like
no,
you and
it's
I are going
just
to hold
it's
different
simply
values.
pragmatism would be the question. And
Well,
I don't know if
okay.
like pragmatism is always value statements, but pragmatism would certainly be the end goal here. And if like I mean, we can even take like the most centrist of positions with pragmatism and argue like what would be the most pragmatic for Americans and apply that empirically
Yeah, but then
and
we
see
just
some
vote
sort of
on it, and the
conclusion.
president would do that.
But this is just how we move the conversation forward because we're simply talking about right now the good of like or whether or not an outcome was met that Trump supporters deemed as favorable and not what outcomes follow that might be
Yeah, but
negative.
that's you introducing an entirely new section because me and
No,
Critical were
that's your
okay. Well,
that was your
so like I
no,
was
no,
saying,
that was
if I
I've
could
been
speak
here for
real
a
quick,
minute.
me and Critical were arguing
You
about
were,
whether or not
you
the
interrupted me, mind you.
yeah,
You set the
bruh,
tone when you interrupted me
bruh.
originally. So if we're gonna set some sort of parameter for how we discuss, you have to set the tone
All right,
too.
would you like a
So I
minute or
didn't say
what?
anything because I thought it was okay. But if it's not, then don't interrupt me
Well,
when I'm
no, it's
speaking.
just because if I'm arguing 2v1, it would kind of go
Well, he's
without
on mute, so you're okay.
He's on
right.
mute.
So
I think you're just
you're
talking to
asking
Chad.
questions, he's asking questions, now the host is asking questions. So I mean I can
No,
engage
no.
all
I'm
of them.
just.
I can engage all. I
What
would just
question
like
did
to have some
I ask?
Hey,
airtime.
Right. I didn't.
hey, hold on. She wasn't asking a question. Chill out. Listen.
I was just saying that Chad wife was talking to you. Critically's mic is on mute, so you're just talking to Chad wife right now. So You could cry about it later if you want, or you can just like have the conversation.
I mean,
I mean, hey,
it's a 2v1. So
he's on
critical
mute.
may
He
chime
has
in.
not said a
Look,
word. He has not said a
this is all
word.
I'm trying to
He's
do.
on mute.
This is all I'm trying to
He's
do.
on mute.
I
He has
would
not
love
said a
to
word since
answer
I
any
started.
questions. I would love to
How
address
about
any
we ask him
points.
critically? Are you okay with me jumping in? Are you sitting on mute right now? Like what's happening? I think you were eating your noodles last
Oh
episode.
yeah, I'm eating my ramen right now. I was hoping for it. I don't know why you're complaining. We've been cordial to you so far, so why are you expecting us to gang up on you all of a sudden? I'll talk to you at once.
I was just cut off by the person above you, and I couldn't respond. So I mean, I'm just
Wait,
talking about
just
decorum.
continue the
You
conversation.
interrupted me.
We can
You
get back
interrupted
to it. We can move past
James. You
this.
set the precedent for how we communicated. You initially interrupted my initial statement when I first got up here. I let it slide because I thought that's how
What
we
was
were
that
going to
statement?
converse.
What was that statement?
It was the initial statement about like the pragmatism and end goal with empiricism.
Yeah,
That was
merely
the
because I
statement.
was
and
going
you
point for
interjected.
point.
I mean, you
How many
just
points
did it
would you
now too,
like?
mind you.
How many points would you like to go before I can respond?
I mean, hey, you tell me. You set the
Let's
precedent.
just
So
do
if we're
one.
interrupting,
Can
that's
you agree
fine.
to
If
doing
we're
one
not,
to one?
if that's fine, but you have to continue that, right? So that's all I'm saying. If
All
you
right.
want to interrupt, we can. If you don't. That's
All
it.
right. So we can go point for point. You can start.
It's the same point that I made earlier in reference to pragmatism and empirics, whether or not these things would lead to some sort of negative outcome towards American citizens. We can take it back to when you guys were discussing the impacts of USID or and like whether or not there's global necessity that like benefits American citizens outside of like some sort of homogenous state. So if you want to presume that, that's fine. But that would be I'd be holding to the position that like let's measure the pragmatism of that.
But wouldn't you agree that pragmatism although it can be a goal that we can agree that we should be pragmatic in certain things, we may have a threshold or a subjective threshold that we will say is pragmatic.
I'm sure we could. Yes. The point in our discussion would be to find some sort of like consensus that we could reach and then go from there. Right. So, like, obviously, we're going to have subjective worldviews. Yours might be a little bit more conservative, mine a little bit more progressive. But the end goal would be that we reach some sort of conclusion in the middle.
Okay. Then we can first agree on the terms. How would you define pragmatic? I can pull it up if you want.
I accept standard. So,
Dealing
whatever
with
the standard.
things sensibly and realistically in a way that is based on practical rather than theoretical considerations.
I would argue that, sure, I can agree that it may hurt some people who are not getting teeth therapy or condoms in Saudi Arabia. But I would argue that if there's a short-term loss for a long-term gain, to me, I still think that's a benefit.
Right. So I think that's what I brought up in the comments too, is that I think it's a bit misleading to assume that the impacts of USAID was just like condoms or what was the other one? Teeth therapy that you listed. It was a lot of it had to do with like open source knowledge sharing and like global impacts of healthcare. We can specifically then shift to like the impacts of like defunding WHO from the United States and how that'll affect American citizens directly. But even then, like this will be more of like an American like homogenous take, but I'm not even measuring the impacts globally of these concerns, but the impacts it'll have on American citizens in reference to health, which we have seen like historically when we like detach from these programs.
So are you saying well, I can agree there's a lot of tertiary things that I don't agree with. There may be an overarching thing that receives most of the budget. But what is that thing, do you know?
What was the question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I understand that there's a lot of tertiary things that I'm bringing up that I don't agree with. And you're right. It might not be the most biggest recipient of the USAID money, but what is? Do you know what is?
There's a couple of different like figures. I know one was like disaster, like poverty rates, like there's been a lot of like meddling of like the United States government uses the term democratic reform, so that could be like going in and putting in people that are more like ideal for the United States government. But yeah, there's different things that it may.
Okay, just doing a quick search. Recipients, the top 10 recipients were Ukraine, Ethiopia, Jordan, Democratic Republic, Congo, Somalia.
Are you asking me like groups, like who receives the most money?
Yeah, because if you want to go for like who's the biggest
I
recipient,
believe it was like
it looks like it's
the
Ukraine.
nations in Africa would receive the like some of the highest
I
funding,
think it
and
might
like
be
South
Ukraine
America.
though. It might be
Okay,
Ukraine.
I'm sorry. Sure. Okay, if it's Ukraine, what's the point being made?
No money for them. No money.
Wait, so is that it? Would
Yeah,
that be the
I don't want. Well, what seems to be going on right now is if let's just say USAID. Well, can you at least bear with me that that it's Ukraine taking the money, the majority of it.
sure, sure.
I don't want the money going to support some type of proxy war between Russia and Ukraine or Russia and America. I'm straight off of that.
Wait, so why though? If there's like some sort of I'm not even a big like Ukraine Russia defender,
Mhm.
like at all, or even like sending lots of money to Ukraine. I think there's certainly some critiques, but like, what's the harm in funding this alleged proxy war?
Because from my understanding, it's just about the NATO's perception of Russia's Russia. NATO doesn't like if Russia's going to take Ukraine, and the U.S. is funding money to do that. I think there's probably a big portion of the Ukrainians who want to go with Russia, but NATO doesn't want that. NATO doesn't like any type of Russian movement, but then Russia doesn't like NATO aggression, so it's kind of like a stalemate. I don't want my money. It could go to other stuff. Just rather it go to my
So
pocket, less taxes, or some other program would be better.
well, I think the concern would be A, whether or not like taxpayer dollars are funding or USAID the way people are alleging they are. B, whether or not we have seen historically Ukraine receive the most amount of funding, or if there's some sort of special consideration needed for the circumstances Ukraine is going in. And then C, whether or not there's some sort of net benefit to United States government participating in this in some way, shape, or form. Mind you, you just argued that USAID was sending condoms to Saudi Arabia at like mass rates, and now the concern is Ukraine. But even operating off of the concern being Ukraine, I would believe that there is a benefit to the United States being involved in this war in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, but that would be an ideological line you're drawing.
And sure, now that's your. Would all be rooted in some sort of ideological line.
But
You would have
that's
to
where it
decide.
becomes subjective when you agree.
Well, that's the nature of like conversing at this level. If we're not going to like fundamentally agree on everything, we're going to have ideological positions in which you push back and I push back. That's the point.
Yeah, so well, can you explain to me then how us funding a proxy war is good for us?
Yeah, so whether or not it be in reference to the oil reserves there, that would like unironically benefit the United States in reference to gas prices, that would help. Whether it be like some sort of red scare like position where you're pushing back on capitalism or whatever. Like yeah, grain was a good one as well. Like there's a ton of net benefits to participating in this war at some level,
Well, then here's where
and
we may be able to
especially not
agree.
to justify completely dismantling USAID because of the funding to Ukraine for this war specifically, especially when like the past fiscal years, it's gone specifically to like aid for like humanitarian aid to like people who are starving, people who are in poverty. It's went to like foreign assistance for like people who are pregnant, things like that. So no,
Okay, well,
like I don't believe
two
it.
things
It's
though.
important to note.
Well, if I could
Oh, go
just
ahead.
respond, two things. You mentioned like the humanitarian aid, but then the Ukrainian aid. So perhaps we can agree on this. Let's just say Trump is freezing certain aid. It could perhaps be like a chilling effect, or maybe putting people on notice, such as Zelensky saying, "Oh snap, maybe Trump is really serious about not funding this war anymore." Perhaps he's using it as a bargaining chip. And if you would say that it would be good for us to continue in a war where we would get the benefits like oil and other resources, it does look like, from my understanding, Trump is trying to do that. He's trying to, in some way, get some type of resource out of Ukraine. So, I mean, we can agree that that does benefit us. If we get some type of oil or whatever resource, then
This is kind of the contradiction that I'm talking about, and I want to hear what you think about the development plan for the Gaza Strip, where Trump wants to send in potentially troops, although the White House could try to rescind that, and then work on building out a development plan there, funded and secured by the U.S. I'm curious if you're opposed to that or not, because he explicitly said that. Um, the issue the issue that I'm having is you're arguing against a State Department MO that's been tried and tested since the beginning of the Cold War. It is what secured American unipolarity around the entire world by operating and funding a bunch of different countries through these proxy engagements, through negotiating business contracts and securing, business support and allies. All of that was because of all of that has occurred because of the Cold War. So it's pretty frustrating when you're arguing against something that has a pretty significant track record against it. And then you're going to say, well, Trump doesn't want these things, but also he does kind of want these things, even though he hasn't laid out a coherent strategy for how he's engaging in international politics.
Yeah, but we're just discussing hypotheticals, and I understand it's to test logic, but going back to your point about us having some type of historical, like bolsterous, you said unipolar like body that has able to get some type of hegemony here. So what? Just because it works, just because it worked, that doesn't mean it's the best way. So if people want to do things a different way, like I understand there's a risk factor to it, but we voted for him to take that risk.
Okay, if you're going to present a new way that transforms a way that's already worked historically, the onus is on you to demonstrate through theoreticals in broad sense, but then, as Kitty said, grounded by empirics and grounded by data, how your new approach or how Trump's new approach is going to be better in general metrics for the US population. Trump has not even come fucking close to doing that, and you certainly haven't.
All right, so there's an issue there, because if Trump's going to give some type of grand master plan, obviously this is going to get in the way of his ability to negotiate. So he's going to let all of his cards on the table. That's probably not the best thing you want to do when you make a deal. So that's laughable. Secondly, we as a collective mandated him, along with the House and the Senate, to do that. We have faith in him to do that. If he fails us, then he fails us. If he's wrong in some things, then he is.
No,
But
I'm sorry. This is the whole.
Just because I don't have some type of weird subjective metrics that you will accept to be convinced of, if I give you some type of grand master plan, we don't owe you anything about that.
Hold on. This is an unfalsifiable approach to the issue. When you say something like, well, there's always negotiating possibilities, there's secrecy, there's covert concerns, there's trying to hide things from potential, opposing agents around the world. If that's your anchor for this entire concept, Trump could be doing literally anything, and we see the deleterious effects in real time, and we see the erosion of allyship in real time. Trump could be doing anything, and then you keep on saying, well, guess what? Ultimately, this is going to work out because his plan is bigger. There's always something that he could be doing. He's always hiding something. It prevents any criticism, and it's unfalsifiable because you have no specific standards to which you can test it against, because Trump could always be thinking of something bigger. It's the whole fucking stupid 4D chess bullshit I hear from all the Trump supporters, where any dumb action he does, well, there's actually in the long term some real power behind it. You just can't see it yet. No, it's fucking pathetic. It's a terrible way to approach politics.
An unfalsifiable claim, it could be that if indeed the results of what would happen if they were going to be things I disagree with, then we can have a discussion about it. Because just because I don't tell you a plan, that doesn't mean I have like a bad faith. It could just be because I want to keep my cards close to my chest. And making something unfalsifiable, we can show it being false if, let's just say if Trump's plan basically makes it so we lose like the majority of our allies by him doing it, I think you could have an argument there. So that's one metric we can use to prove his plan false. So if you want to
wait, hold on. If your testing is, hey, if America crumbles and shits itself, we can finally be like, yeah, okay, it was probably a bad idea. That's the fact that you think that that's the way we actually test this is insane. No, we identify behaviors, plans, the way they've been implemented in the past, or things they're similar to, or the real-time effects we're seeing now, and that's how we criticize it on. His whole engagement with Mexico and Canada was a hilarious failure in effective negotiation, angering them, angering the citizens, then backing off and conceding, assuming that Trump or that Canada and Mexico were actually doing something, even though they were doing things they would fucking do anyways. It's a terrible approach. Trump has fucking nuclear codes. You can't
All right,
be
well,
like,
how many
hey,
points
we have
before I
to
can
wait
address?
till the end of his presidency before we actually say, oh, it was a bad idea to vote for him.
I
No,
was just merely
hold
giving
him
you
to
an
account in
example
real
of why it
time.
was unfalsifiable, just thus refuting your claim. So to go back to the what I think the main contention is that basically you have a metric that you're going to be convinced of to agree with what Trump is doing against your own political bias, which I find very, very difficult to believe. It's like you're setting, once again, like I said to the lady at top, a subjective metric that you will accept. And when it comes to democracies, we don't necessarily base everything by the book, tit for tat, cross the T's, dot the I's. Not everybody works that way. Sometimes people shoot from the hip, and this is why we voted for him.
Man, I wish you could like take your brain and remove all of the just junk around it and see the way you're talking right now and know that the thinking that you're engaging in prevents accountability for people in positions of power.
I would argue that what you're doing is you have a unreasonable standard that you set for Trump, thus continuing the status quo is what I'm trying to get rid of. So if you don't agree with how it's done, too bad, you lost.
What? Was that the point?
That's what I've been arguing this
That-
entire time.
yeah.
That's your subjective morals against mine, bro.
So none of this is actually about developing coherent plans that's beneficial for the American people.
No.
It's just fuck the status quo.
No,
You know
I'm
what?
saying
You know what? Fuck the status quo.
Go ahead.
Putting
Mhm.
a Schnazi in power. You know what? Fuck the status quo. Putting an infant toddler in power. All this stuff would fuck the status quo. I don't care if it fucks the status quo. I need a good reason to support it.
You want to maintain it because you're giving unreasonable metrics for Trump
No,
doing things.
I'm. Wait, hold on, bro. I'm a fucking socialist. I'm not pro status quo.
Well,
We
that
can
even proves
shift
my
it.
point even further.
That's fine. We can shift the status quo. If it's to be shifted, the plan needs to be coherent, identifiable,
who?
and have clear steps to achieve that.
But says who? Who says that? Who draws that moral standard?
If that moral I'm not talking about morals right
You
now.
just said should. You said we ought to do something. So back that claim up. Who sets that standard? What we should and should not do.
If you're talking, if you want for changes in society to be productive and successful and for people to rally behind them effectively, and for us over time to analyze past changes and see how we can grow on them in the future and increase the productivity of our methods or the efficacy of our methods, you need to have that coherent planning.
Okay.
So assuming you want that, now maybe you don't want that. Maybe you're just like, fuck.
You said successful, you said productive. These are value statements. And within that, you have a threshold that someone will agree is valuable and some will not. That is the main point when I'm bringing up the subjectivity of it. And that's why we have democracies, because we may disagree on that. So we vote on it. You guys just have a problem with it when it works against you.
You're a postmodernist.
Definitely not.
I fucking hate postmodernists at this point. I used to call myself a postmodernist. I can't call myself that anymore because all the people who are like, well, every single proposition has an implicit value statement that is subjective, and therefore, we're all just floating in our little islands. What I'm talking about, no, I'm very pro-democracy. What I'm talking about is general, oriented in human psychology metrics for human well-being. That's what I'm talking about. Those should be relatively agreeable.
Human well-being is a subjective term.
And cooperate on the.
Do you just right? Yep, cooked them. Yeah.
Human well-being is a subjective term. The collective interests of a group of people is a subjective. I'm going to kill all terms are subjective. You fucking dumbass. Jesus Christ. I dropped him. I'm not dealing with that bullshit.
He has this really good video on how women objectify themselves.
It was so good.
Oh, no.
I tore it, honestly. Like,
Right.
Wait, can you play it on live or no?
Yeah, I can play it online.
Okay.
This is proof that a lot of women date out of their league by objectifying themselves. Jane meets a man who she's attracted to. He's an 8.5. But Jill, Roxanne, Jasmine, they all know that Jane is a 7. But what does Jane do? Every time she knows that guy is going to be around, or when she meets him on a date, she literally becomes someone she's not. This is called makeup. A 7, with a span of 30 minutes, can become an 8. Lying, deceiving the world. For what? At the expense of being pretty for the moment, putting your looks in the forefront instead of your heart and your spirit. You sacrifice and you degrade your own sense of image, being comfortable in your own skin, your morals.
Yes, King.
What, for being more presentable, more done up? These terms, they mean nothing. It's always at the cost of objectifying yourself. But yet you want a real man. It's a paradox. Stop practicing your own insecurity. Find a man who's comfortable with you being comfortable looking at
This absolute fucking dumb fuck. I'm pro death penalty again. I'm sorry. I just have to be at this point. Yeah, that's my limit. Okay, do you think, I don't know if this dude's in the comments, do you think women would like it if you showed up to a date wearing what you like woke up in? That's very real. That's very personal. No, people like when during first impressions, you just put on your best self. That's normal. That's typical. Jump on a trampoline and have a lot of fun.
Trampoline and have a lot of
What? What did I miss?
critically crashed out. There's more. They're better, I think. What's happening?
Can't argue if I'm kicked. Cope all you want.